Home is behind, the world ahead, and there are many paths to tread, through shadow to the edge of night until the stars are all right. A mist and shadow, cloud and shade, all shall fade, all shall fade. Are you sure she's asleep? There were voices in the darkness around me. They were familiar, but cold. Yes, I've tucked her in. It was Father's voice. What's got you so nervous? The others and I, we're not sure we want to be on the project anymore. You saw what she did to Shade and Twinkle. It was a more feminine voice that spoke up this time. Tartarus, we were barely able to save Beaker, and he might still die. That's enough. From all of you. Daddy was fighting for me. I just knew it. How can you trust the subject after... I said that's enough! Daddy shouted. The crack of thunder above jolted me from my dream. Instinctively, I grabbed my rifle and pulled it up. Feature sat glaring at me in the dark, his angry eyes shining like beacons of blue fire. My heart raced and began to calm down in the darkness of the morning, and I flopped back with a groan. The Pip-Buck's clock said that I still had another hour before dawn. I couldn't afford to lose sleep, not until these ponies were safe. Closing my eyes, I found it easy enough to drift off again. I hoped that these dreams weren't going to be a common thing. But I guess I'd been wrong. We'd left camp at first light. We'd stopped only a few miles from Dodge for the night. Without rest, some of the injured might not have been able to make it there. I wasn't about to lose any more innocent lives through my mistakes. The walk had been mostly quiet. Only a faint murmuring between ponies here and there broke the silence. With the gates into Dodge in sight, I felt relief. You blame yourself, Pretia spoke up, walking closely by my side. If you hadn't left, they still would have... Not now, Preed, I sighed. All right, but as your friend, I'd advise you against bottling things up, he commented before giving me more space. Up ahead, Paladin Harmony approached with a group of armed guards. She'd seen us coming from a ways away, and I could tell she knew trouble would be right behind us. The group of them stopped just past the gate and waited for us. I caught Pallet's eye, and the thought of missed gleam hadn't been with the group filled me with guilt. Coco said that once the rest of the citizens were into the cave, they boarded it up. She said that by then, the smoke from the fires had already been too thick to see, and that they waited for them at the end of the cave. Storm, what happened to y'all? Harmony spoke simply. She looked over the crowd as they streamed into the city. Chasm. It's gone. It was hard enough to even begin to think of explaining it to her. Steel Rangers burned it down, and we don't have much time. Beryl, find these ponies somewhere to stay. Harmony raised her hoof to the brown stallion standing next to her. And the rest of y'all can find us some food and water. With her words, the guards dispersed and left Pallet, Harmony, and I standing alone. Come on back to the shop. This sounds like something we need to discuss in private. When you were there, Pallet spoke up hesitantly. Did you... Pallet, I'm sorry. I shook my head and stepped forward. She didn't make it out. I wrapped my hoof around her neck and pulled her close. Oh, I see. Pallet stuttered in my hold, spreading her wings as she pushed me away gently. I'm going to see if Mom needs anything at the inn. With that, she leaped into the air and took off into town. Pallet always wore her emotions close to the surface, and even with it having just been a fling, the news hit her hard. Before you ask, Harmony started as we started walking towards the town. Aunt Skyline got here yesterday. Though, with what y'all have been through, I don't think y'all care to get caught up. As she talked, Harmony kept craning her head as she looked at me. Are your eyes blue? Of all the questions to ask at a time like this, she chooses to ask something like that? There were people who needed help, defenses to be built, The Rangers were coming after us. I could just feel it. I didn't have time for foolish games. We need weapons. Defenses. Ignoring her questions seemed to kick her back into the right mindset. Make sure to set up that big gun of yours again. We're going to need it. Are you sure we can't just talk our way out of this? Harmony sighed out, walking ahead of me, and opened the door to her shop, showing me in. What did they want with Chasm anyway? Me. I stared at her. They wanted me. The door shut behind me, and I sat down hard. I don't know why. When I went to turn in Pretius, they took me in as well. We escaped, but I don't know. Something happened when we did, and now they want me. Oh, one moment. Harmony waved her hoof in the air for a moment. She turned and trotted off to the back room. I focused on why she was making a ruckus in the back, to keep myself from thinking about Chasm. After a moment, she returned with a small round disc in her muzzle. It was a mirror. She? Brew. Was she still going on about my eyes? A bolt of anger ran through me as I looked down with the intent to smash the pre-war vanity object. But the other side of the reflection, a blue-eyed mare, stared back at me. I paused and just stared. My eyes were positively glowing blue. It was hard to look at, but I had to. It doesn't matter. We're all in danger, and it's my fault. Harmony set the mirror down and put a hoof around me. She was like a sister to me, and I needed her with me on this. She'd pulled me into a tight embrace, and I felt some of the stress melt away. It's all right. We'll get through this. She spoke softly. While holding me close, she spun us towards the door. Releasing me, she walked over and opened it. Look, I need to take some time to inventory some things if we're going to mount a defense. You should go rest. But, I objected, finding my muzzle shut by her hoof. You're no good to any of us in that state you are. Please, I don't care what you do. Just take it easy, and I'll get you when we're ready to start. She smiled softly. I didn't want to rest, but she was right. Frazzled nerves on the job meant mistakes. Mistakes that I couldn't afford to have in a fight like this one coming up. I stepped out into the street again and found Pretius leaning up against the storefront. Tasteless had disappeared amongst the rush of ponies around town, and I was out of cigarettes. Mai caught the saloon down the street, and then nodded for Pretius to follow. We made our way down the street and to the bar's doors. I hoped that Cask wasn't still angry about the fight I'd had in there. Pushing the doors open, I caught his gaze. He dropped the glass he had been cleaning at the time and scrambled on his hooves to get his shotgun. Like I said before, you're banned from the bar. Now get. He raised the gun and pointed it at me. Seeing as this city is going to be a war zone soon, I paused, looking around at the empty tavern. I let those words sink in before continuing. You might need all the caps you can get. Fine, but no fighting. He grumbled and sat down his shotgun. Now, what do y'all have? Whiskey. A lot of it. I shambled up to the bar, pulling out the stool, and sat on it, and flopped my head down onto the bar top. Quite the mess we've gotten ourselves into, huh, Preed? I've been in worse. He simply remarked, that told me that he was going to keep talking. In fact, there was this one jam I was in a while ago. Never thought I'd actually make it out intact. His magic pulled one of those stools out, and he took a seat behind me. When the bomb fell, and every pony died. All he got from me was, for his ill attempt at humor, was an annoyed sigh. Well, I thought it was funny. He pat me on the back. I guess you had to have been there. The door to the bar opened behind us, and I could hear as some pony entered. Light steps meant no armor, but they walked with purpose. They had a job to do, and they were walking straight towards me. I had been about ready to stand up and fight when they spoke. Hey there, beautiful. The stallion stopped a few feet behind me. A wise choice. Before you left, I never got the chance to thank you for saving my life. I turned around slowly, finding the dopey grin and the blushing cheeks of that Pegasus we'd drug out all the way out here. I gave him a grunt as the bartender set the bottle of whiskey down in front of me with a pair of shot glasses. Compliments on my looks are the last thing I need right now. I turned back towards my booze and pulled the bottle close. You're welcome for me saving your life. Now, leave me alone. Can't you see I'm busy, relaxing? Come on, don't be like that. He took a few steps closer and held his hoof out over the bar. Out from his fetlock dropped a trio of shiny golden bits. Barkeep, I'll pay for this lady's drinks. Cask put his hooves on the bar as I cracked a smile. This was just too good. Is this some kind of joke? Cask raised an eyebrow at the Pegasus and slowly slid the bits off the bar top. What? No. The new guy was confused and what sounded like offended. Why would it be? We haven't used bits down here since the war ended, dumbass. Cask snorted. Grabbing his rag, he hoofed another one of his glasses over and started to clean it. If you want to use those, go back to that paradise in the sky of yours, along with the rest of your kind. I gave a chuckle and looked over to Preed. He wore a deadpan and a pair of judgmental eyes. Maybe he's the one who needs to unwind. Sorry so much for your being kind to your customers, the Pegasus muttered under his breath. To be a customer, you need to buy something. As for kindness, go somewhere else if you're looking for that. Cash looked at me with a shrug. Can you believe this kid? You should listen to him. I mumbled and poured myself a shot. Trouble's coming, and I don't think you want to be here when it shows up. Setting the bottle down, I took the shot in my fetlock and brought it to my lips. It burned all the way down my throat, but damn did I need it. With a frustrated grunt, the Pegasus turned and walked from the bar. I poured myself another drink. When I set the bottle down, Preetius tapped me on the shoulder. I ignored it and reached for my glass. Preetius' hoof grabbed my leg and held it down. You know, for a pony who defeated a Wendigo, an old stallion called out from behind me. You sure aren't very smart. I turned slowly, vaguely remembering that voice. Standing in the bar doorway was a pony under a cloak. My mind searched for the familiar outline until I knew where I'd seen him before. Hey, you're that pony I saw outside the facility. I spoke slowly, letting go of my glass. He knew what was going on inside there. I don't know how, but he might have been the one who set it all up in the first place. If so, then I owed this guy a good beating until he told me why. How observant of you. He spoke in an exasperated manner, like he was bored. Since we've last met, you've managed to pick a fight with one of the most dangerous beings this world has seen. I'd say that takes some skill, but that'd be giving you too much praise for an act of stupidity. Wait, what? Was that an insult, or was he generally trying to piss me off? Listen, you old coot. What exactly? He raised his voice to silence me. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, and by extension, this town. I'd recommend running, but what would be the point? You'd just leave a trail of death and destruction in your wake. From him, too? I swear, if Feature puts you up to this, I'll beat the both of you. I pushed out my stool and turned around. As I stood, I felt the cold steel of Cask's shotgun press against my head. You have exactly 30 seconds to tell me who the hell you are and why the fuck you're talking about. I had to resist the urge to reach for my gun when he shifted his weight. He put his hoof into his cloak and pulled out a cloth sack. Shaking it, it sounded like caps. He tossed it onto the table, spilling it open and shattering caps all over it. For your drink, and that barkeep's troubles. The stallion sighed and turned back towards the door. I'd tell you why this happened, but you'll be dead within a day along with his town, so what'd be the point? He waved his hoof as he opened the door. You've got the right idea to fight. You can't win, but I'm sure you won't make it easy for him. He slipped out of the door and out of sight. I wasn't going to lose to him this time. Bolting forward, I slammed the door open and skid into the dirt. Nothing. I spun around the other way. Still nothing. I face-hooped and groaned. One of these days, shit will stop happening around me and I can die of boredom. I shook my head and turned back towards the bar. Breeze was standing, holding the door open for me. One can only hope for that kind of fate in the wasteland. He offered a small smile to me. I pushed past him and walked into the bar. Wrapping my hooves around the bottle, I left the shot glass as I turned back towards the door. I'd had enough relaxing. Get up. You've been asleep for an hour. Harmony kicked me. Come on. I need you to help with this. I sighed and stretched out amongst the warmth of a tarp I'd crawled under. It had gotten so cold as I drank that I needed something to curl up under. Sitting up, my back let out a few pops, reminding me that the wooden floors were not fun to nap on. The empty whiskey bottle thumped across the floors of Harmony's shop, but Pretty's was nowhere to be found. You know, you still got a room upstairs you could be using, she remarked as she hoofed the empty crate onto her back. I do? It was hard to speak through my yawn, but I'm sure she got the gist of it. What do you need my help with, anyway? Rubbing my eyes, I found that the light of day didn't agree with them. I actually let out a whine when she opened the door, and the light flooded in. The sound of concerned ponies filled the air from outside as well. Every pony simmer down! Harmony shouted, placing the crate in the dirt outside. Slowly, I walked to the open door and looked out. It was a crowd of ponies that must have consisted of nearly every pony who normally lived in Dodge. I say this because there were plenty of familiar faces. She raised her hoof and pointed to the box. I know most of y'all have probably heard what happened to Chasm. She looked around at the group as complete silence filled the air. I'm here to tell you that the same ones who did that, well, they're on their way here to do the same to Dodge. She paused as a collective gasp ran through the group. We need to work together if we want to keep our town intact. Why don't we just give them what they want? One of the ponies in the back cried out. I heard they wanted your friend. Another one responded. Said it was her fault they're coming in the first place. I say hoof her over. They got a collective roar from the crowd. Harmony started to try to calm them again, but all it took was that one spark. That's all ponies ever took out of action. That's how we ended up with this fucking wasteland in the first place. Still, it's true. I caused all of this. Maybe if I just left south and turned myself over, nobody would else get hurt. Then again, they didn't even care that I wasn't in Chasm and they burnt it down. I shivered over as a chilly wind whipped down the street. Even the angry ponies felt it as they slowly encroached around Harmony's shop. A shotgun blast filled the air, and every pony in the crowd was silent. Slowly, they parted as a welcome face stepped through it. Tasteless gave me a smile and a wink as she walked through, toting her shotgun proudly. Behind her was Prettious and Pallet. The three of them pushed up through and towards Harmony, stopping at the door to protect me. I knew that they all shared my opinion. They knew that this was my fault, but instead of trying to save what they have, they stood by me. A smile found its way across Pretious's muzzle, and I returned it. In that moment, for just that moment, nothing in my life was wrong. I wasn't afraid, hurt, or in danger. Hell, I wasn't even cold anymore because I knew that my friends were here. This was a mistake, and I was going to fix it. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. Prettious and Harmony looked concerned, but I pushed past them to the wooden crate. Whispers snaked through the crowd, but I silenced them as I flipped the crate over, climbing on top and looking down at them. Yes, it's me they want. I looked down at Stimpak, who stood at the center of the crowd, and sober for once. Were I one of your family members, would you give them up so freely? For the safety of the town? Coldcut spoke up. The mayor was Market's butcher, and no fan of mine in the past. You're damn right I would. They didn't even know that I was in Chasm, and they burnt it without a single thought. I glared at her. You hand me over, they'll burn you all, just to watch. Shouting and arguments erupted from the crowd, and panic ran through every single eye in front of me. I stomped my hoof on the crate a few times until a few of them gave their attention to me. I'm going to fight, and I'm going to keep fighting because that's what I have to do. The rest of you are going to have a tougher choice. As I spoke, one by one they fell silent again. There might just be hope for us yet. I need you. We need each other. This town needs all of us if it's going to survive. Against those toasters. They'll kill us all from 1,000 yards. Cask called out as he walked over from his bar. He was loaded shoulder to ass with supplies, and looked rather eager to leave. I'm not going to say that we can win. I won't lie, and tell you that. I found a pair of bright blue eyes staring up at me from the edges of the crowd. It was the Pegasus from earlier, come to listen in on the commotion. But when you're fighting in your own streets, when you're fighting for your families, it all hurts a little less and makes a little more sense. For them, this is just a place, but for us, this is our home. I'll stay, the Pegasus shouted as he pushed towards me. This may not be my home, but maybe someday it will be. He smiled brighter than he had at the bar as he gazed at me. And I'll fight to give it a chance. I'm willing to fight, Feature called out as he rounded the street corner. A bully will stay a bully until some pony stands up to them. I couldn't save Chasm from the reign of terror, but I'll be damned if I let them burn down Dodge. One after another, the ponies relented. They would help me to fix what I'd done. I needed each and every one, if any of us were going to come out alive. I hadn't been lying. I'd seen Ragers face 10-to-1 odds and still make it out on top. One last thing, Harmony shouted out. For any pony who chooses not to stay, my brother will lead you north, towards Manhattan. Any supplies you don't need, we'll put to use. Can Shortstaff make a journey like that? I turned to Harmony. Stepping off the box, she sighed and shook her head. I don't rightly know. Doc says he's stable enough, but he ain't better. She looked at me with concern weighing heavily on her mind. I'm just worried is all, you know. We both turned and entered her shop. The others piled in along with the addition of Feature and the Pegasus Stallion. Look, there's no way we can win this. I sat down as the door to the shop shut. We just have to hold them back long enough to get the rest of the town's ponies clear. And that's it. That's your grand plan, the Pegasus sputtered out. Who the hell are you? Tayla snorted out as she flared her wings. Wings that, in fact, I'd totally forgotten she had since the bunker. The metal just made them blend into her sides. You act like you've got a better plan, so let's fucking hear it. I'm Shadow Dasher, Jr., Sky Marshal, and Chief Navigation Officer of the Lenticular. He reared up in defense. And you call yourself a Pegasus. Can you even fly, or is that just amalgamation of metal just an excuse to be as dumb as it looks? Shut up, both of you, I snapped. Shadow, get on the roof of the shop and help Pallet get guns up there. That's where we'll hold out. Turning to Preed and Harmony, I looked at each of them. We need ponies who are staying armed in fortified locations. Do what you can to organize them. And what should I do? The soft voice of a mare came from the back room. I spun around to find the dueling red coat and stark white mane of another Pegasus walking in. Her golden eyes, though, were just as sharp as the day I'd first saw them. I might not be the best of shape, but I can help. Skyline smiled softly before Pallet trot over to her. Mom, you can help by making sure that Shortstaff makes it to Manhattan with the others. She had her voice lowered and wore a bright blush across her face. Nonsense. I'm a very capable mare, and I know I'm more combat experienced than any of you. She pat Pallet on the back and pushed past her. Now, where do you need me? There's a rock formation to the south. I started slowly, catching Pallet's worried glare. I want you to be the lookout. You see so much as a speck on the horizon out of place. You come tell us. I waited for her to nod before continuing. But once you do spot them, you head off with Shortstaff. There's quite a few who won't be able to fight, and your combat experience may come in handy. Very well. I'll pack some supplies and head out. She nodded and turned back around. Pallet hooked a hoof around her and gave her a tight squeeze. Pallet was the lucky and unlucky one in this fight. I knew that if it came to it, she could fly. The question was, when it came time, would she do it, or would she be too stubborn to leave our side? I think that knowing her mother was still in danger would be enough to convince her. And what am I to do? Feature scoffed and rolled his eyes. You're to get as many ponies as you can and build a wall around the southern edge of Dodge. I turned to him and prodded his chest. I know you can get it done in only a few hours. Turning towards the back room, I waited for the inevitable. And what will you be doing? Feature asked slowly. trying to find a way to repeat whatever happened in that bunker. Walking away, I didn't care if he'd been content with my answer. I trotted through the back room and weaved through the supplies of treasures and junk that Harmony kept back there. A thin set of steps that ran up the back wall squeaked loudly under hoof as I climbed them to the second floor. On my left was the door to Harmony's room. On the right was the ladder that led out to the roof. And at the end of the hallway was the room I once called my own. I walked towards it, remembering fondly the time that I'd first started to work on bounties that came in here. After long trips and tough fights, I'd come back here, open the door, and collapse onto my bed. Turning the dusty handle slowly, I pushed the door open. The small room looked just like I'd left it all those years ago. The rotting mattress, stuffed with rotting hay, certainly didn't smell any better than it had back then. The small writing desk that sat against the wall facing the window still held empty shell casings for my rifle, and mostly rusted magazine of my now-lost pistol. I closed the door and took a seat on the bed, looking across the old bookshelf that sat against the far wall. The old copies of the Daring Do novels my parents had given me must have sat untouched longer than anything else in the room. I had to have read each of them at least a dozen times as a filly, though I don't think I'll ever know what happened after she and Rainbow Dash stopped, some guy, from starting the drought. Although, I don't think I ever cared, seeing as the wasteland never gets enough rain as it is. Next to the books was an object that I had the most used in the room. It stood about 8 inches across and about 10 inches high. Held together by a steel frame, it contained the innocence of 3 ponies. It was my most prized possession. Slowly I reached out and hooked the picture in my hoof. I pulled it close and looked at it for the millionth time. A smile worked its way across my muzzle as I'd always had. It had been one of the coldest winters I'd ever felt, and we were starving amongst the ruins of North Manhattan. Dad didn't find us any food, but he had found us an actual working camera. He said that even had a single undeveloped shot of film left. The thing was that the camera would fetch us a good price, but undeveloped film was worth 10 times as much. The night we found it, we'd taken shelter in an old basement as a blizzard raged above us. With a single spark battery lantern for light, the 3 of us had huddled up for warmth. Mother told us the story of how they met to keep our minds off the hunger, but Father, he surprised us all when he suddenly lifted the camera from his bag and held it in front of us and smiled. Oh, I must have been 13 in this picture. I'd never been happier in my life that night. We were freezing, and we were starving, but we were family. Sure, I know they weren't my real parents, but I still love them more than anything. Today must be the last day that I can see them at all, even if it is just a picture. Setting it back down carefully, I knew I didn't want that to be the case. I flopped back into my bed roughly, sinking into the relative plushiness that I hadn't felt since the farmhouse outside the facility. I let out a deep breath as I lay there. Closing my eyes, I tried to remember what it was like that I'd done back in the bunker. I remembered that I felt the rage of losing iron will, but that can't be it. I felt angry hundreds of times before, far angrier than that, and nothing's ever happened. The more I visualized it in my head, the further the feeling got from me. I just needed to think harder. That was all. It was a mistake I'd realized far too late. It seems that I've made a mistake in trusting your judgment. I spoke with a cold authority I'd hoped to forget. The view through the eyes of the stallion of my earlier dream showed me a bloody and beaten elder chili pepper laying on the floor. Around me sat the armored maintenance bay of the Steel Ranger bunker. Please, my lord, spare me. He choked out through his bloody muzzle. His one intact eye stared up at me in fear as he trembled on the floor. I will not fail you. Why should I trust you when you let that mare get away? Do you think I am amused by your collection of excuses? I raised my voice, but nothing but pure hatred poured out of me. The elder whimpered and curled himself in fear. As much as I'd wanted to see this, it was wrong. This wasn't the justice he deserved. This was torture. Do not worry. I will not let you fail me again. I looked up to a familiar green-coated stallion. Maze, if you will. I nodded to the elder slowly. Without hesitation, Maze took a few steps towards the elder. I didn't understand what was happening until he lifted a hoof and put it to the elder's neck and pressed down. The elder flailed his legs as his windpipe was crushed, slowly gasping with weakening gurgles. Eventually those stopped and the elder lay with his one eye half-lidded and soulless. A cold feeling enveloped the horn the stallion had. The sensation of static worked its way up my body and collected the horn. With a resounding zap, the spell emitted a bolt of blue from my horn. It struck the elder, turning his coat into a darker shade and causing his body to jump. There was a flash of blue in his eyes before it drained. I wondered what that was all supposed to achieve. When the elder groaned, slowly he rolled back over and got to his hooves. His wounds didn't seem to faze him at all, and when he looked up, he wore the same blank stare that I'd seen the technicians wear when I was at the bunker. This wasn't a dream. This was all happening. My host let out a resounding laugh as the elder rose and stood at attention. I love the feeling of necromancy in the morning, don't you, Maze? I looked over the paladin, who looked just as blank as he had in the last dream. You know, I liked you better when you were chatty. Oh well. To win, you gotta break a few eggs and all that. What is thy bidding, my master? The elder's voice was cold and emotionless as he spoke. The elder had died, I knew that. This was just some monster that looked like him. Ah, well, yes. I suppose it's time you got suited up. I pointed my hoof at the set of power armor that had been set on the table where they had taken my leg off. It wasn't the same armor I'd seen the other rangers wearing, and this one looked more ornate. It had been tinted to a midnight blue, and had small blue lights illuminating from the gaps of the armored plates. The helmet was no different, but had an attachment that made my blood boil. Iron Will's horns had been cruelly welded onto it, and one of the standard power armor eyes had been replaced with one of Iron Will's. Oh, I nearly forgot. My host spoke up, levitating over a golden ring. He sat it upon the helmet like a crown, and I could feel my host's lips curl into a smile. Now, you are ready to fix your mistake. I stepped back while the elder slowly donned his armor. You are to take my forces and go after that mare. You are to take her, the ghoul, and her pip-buck intact. The rest you may kill. Do you understand? This one understands. The elder spoke as he lowered his helmet on. It sealed with a hiss, and the armor strode forward, turned, and followed him into the hallway. We wound through the empty halls of the base, turning and trotting up through where Iron Will had given his life. Past that room, we climbed the set of stairs that led to the door of the wasteland. As it opened, an unexpected sight met my eyes. Standing in formation were the other paladins. Each of their armors had been tinted blue as well, but lacked the horns or crown. Behind them stood the other steel rangers, clad in old equestrian plate mail. My host smiled as he looked upon one of the closer ponies. The blank and emotionless gaze of Tabasco met him. As if that weren't enough, behind the armored ponies stood a mass of wastelanders. They looked normal enough, but even at a glance I could tell they were two foul monsters. Bullet wounds, twisted limbs, and dangling entrails accompanied them as they stood with blank expressions. Among them, I saw the odd combination of black stripes over a yellow coat. Lomi stood among the monsters as one of them, but Mist Gleam wasn't with her from what I could tell. A new power in these lands has arisen, I shouted to the masses before me. Tomorrow the land will be stained with the blood of the living. The revenge and power I so greatly deserve will not be denied. Minions, you are to march north to victory, siege the towns, slay the innocent, and leave none but my enemies alive. Even with a cheer, or recognition, the whole of the army moved as one and turned around. They stepped in sync as my host started to laugh, his voice ringing in the air in maniacal laughter that felt like I was going to corrupt my very being. It was all too much. I felt like throwing up. I shook awake and rolled off the bed. I doubled over on the floor and screamed before my stomach churned and emptied itself. Hurried hoofsteps echoed through the halls outside as I lay there with tears streaming down my face. I looked up as the door was swung open and Pretius looked down in concern. "It's not just the Rangers," I gasped, and coughed through my bile, dry heaving as their faces ran through my mind. I couldn't stand the thought of what would happen to us. There wasn't any way we were going to last even 5 minutes against a force like that. It's a goddess-damned army. Chapter end. The end of the world was only the beginning of a darker, bloodier chapter in pony history. Quests finished, none. Quests started, none. Levels earned, none. Perks earned, none.